Today, we sail backward into December of 1872, a restless Atlantic stretch wide under a bruised winter sky. Out here, silence is never gentle. It crackles in the rigging. It lurks between waves like a dare. And then, a sight no sailor should ever meet. A brigantine drifts aimlessly, sails shredded to ribbons, will loosen its socket, her flag hanging limp as if in mourning. On deck, no voices, no footsteps, no hands on the ropes. Below, provisions stacked neatly, charts waiting on the captain's table, a child's shoe still tucked beneath a bunk, but not a single soul. The name on her bow was Mary Celeste, and while the ship lived on, the people inside her story were erased. Not drowned, not butchered, simply gone, as though the Atlantic had swallowed their very shadows. To the men who first boarded her, it felt less like discovery and more like intrusion, like stepping into a room where life had been torn out mid-breath. The logbooks could not explain. The cargo could not explain. The ship herself refused to explain. And from that day on, sailors stopped calling her a brigantine and started calling her something else, a ghost. They found her adrift in the Atlantic like a ghost in daylight, her sails ragged, her wheel unmanned, her silence heavier than cannon fire. December 1872, a half-rotten brigantine named Mary Celeste glided aimlessly, its deck slick with seawater but strangely clean of struggle. On board, the logbook stopped mid-sentence, an entry written with the same calm precision as if the captain had never suspected doom. Food for 6 months still sat in the hold. The crew's clothes, tobacco, personal effects, all untouched, waiting. But where were they? 10 souls, evaporated into nothing. Not a drop of blood, not a snapped rope, not a sign of mutiny or storm. Just the uncanny absence of humanity in a place made for it. Imagine walking into a house where dinner is still warm on the table, bed still unmade from the night before, but every living body has simply dissolved. That was the Mary Celeste. And it doesn't help that the last log entry, November 25th, 1872, was boring, deadly boring. Coordinates, weather, business as usual, not a whisper of panic, not the scratch of trembling hand. Then emptiness. If horror films have taught us anything, it's that the mundane detail before catastrophe is the cruelest trick of all. Sailors who first boarded her from the rescuing ship Dei Grazia described the atmosphere as oppressive, suffocating, like stepping inside a coffin with the lid left open. And though no corpses greeted them, every creak of her timber seemed to echo a question that has never been answered. Did those men and women choose to abandon ship, or were they taken by something that does not leave footprints? The sea doesn't talk. It swallows, digests, and smirks in silence. But this time, it left us a riddle wrapped in splintered wood and salted wind. The Mary Celeste isn't a wreck, it's a question. And every time we get close to answering it, the answer rots away like rope left in brine. Picture the year 1872. The world was restless, caught between old shadows and new machines. The American Civil War had ended less than a decade earlier, leaving scars both visible and hidden. Across the Atlantic, Europe was reeling from the Franco-Prussian War, with nations redefining themselves in blood and borders. And out on the seas, those infinite, indifferent plains of water, commerce was booming. Steam engines had begun to carve ugly black scars across the horizon, but sails still ruled the cargo trade. Wooden ships with white wings carried coal, alcohol, food, and people between continents, linking old empires with a hunger of new ones. The ocean, though, was not a highway. It was a predator's hunting ground. Storms, rogue waves, pirates, disease, every voyage was a wager against nature's cruelty. And yet, sailors trusted the rules of their world. If a ship disappeared, the sea acclaimed it. If wreckage floated back, it told a story of violence, mutiny, or storm. There were always clues, always something left behind to explain the vanishing. But the Mary Celeste belonged to a different script. The brigantine had been built in 1861 in Nova Scotia, christened with the unlucky name Amazon. From the start, She was cursed, or so people whispered. A series of captains died aboard her. Collisions, groundings, bad luck followed her wake like a shadow that refused to let go. By the time she was refitted, sold, and renamed Mary Celeste, sailors already muttered that she carried ill fate in her timbers. The sea, after all, was a place of omens. Change a ship's name, and you were practically begging Poseidon to take notice. This was the backdrop of the 19th century Atlantic, a mixture of progress and superstition, of science racing against folklore. Telegraph cables were wiring continents together, yet men at sea still carved charms into their knives to ward off demons. It was an age when the unknown wasn't abstract. It was daily bread. Every creak in the night, every light on the horizon, could mean salvation or death. And into this world sailed the Mary Celeste on November 7th, 1872, carrying 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol, her holds packed, her crew assembled, her captain calm. She was a routine cargo vessel on a routine voyage from New York to Genoa. But routine means nothing to the sea. The ocean isn't routine. Its appetite disguised as horizon. So when she was found a month later drifting silently, her lifeboat missing, her crew vanished like candle smoke, she didn't just disrupt commerce. She disrupted reality. A ship without people is not just an accident. It's a statement. It was as if the ocean had left us a calling card saying, "You don't understand me and you never will." Let's talk about the man at the helm, the one whose name gets tangled in this mystery like a ghostly signature. Captain Benjamin Briggs. A New Englander by birth, a man carved out of Puritan wood, devout, disciplined, and with a reputation that commanded respect even from the most salt-worn sailors. He was not reckless. He was not cruel. He was, by all accounts, a man you would trust with your life on a vessel hundreds of miles from land. Briggs had a family, and that detail twists the knife. His wife, Sarah, and their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia, sailed with him on the Mary Celeste. Imagine that for a moment. Not just a grim-faced sailors in a routine of duty, but a toddler's laugh echoing down the wooden corridors, a mother's hand folding laundry in a cabin. This wasn't just cargo. It was a moving home. Briggs was the kind of captain who believed in merging his worlds, the sea and his family, and that decision would forever bind their fates to the ocean's Enigma. The crew he selected? 8 men, mostly Germans, handpicked for skill and loyalty. Experienced sailors, none with reputations of troublemakers or mutineers. Briggs was meticulous. He wouldn't have tolerated a single hothead on a voyage carrying explosive alcohol across storm-prone waters. And the ship itself, the Mary Celeste, freshly refitted, strong, seaworthy, though perhaps still dogged by whispers of its cursed past. She was smaller than the grand frigates that roamed the Atlantic, but sturdy enough for the trip from New York to Genoa. Cargo secure, provisions in order, a family on board, a capable crew. By every logical measure, this was a voyage destined to be uneventful. But logic doesn't steer the sea. There's something unnerving in the image of Briggs, the serious, religious man, standing on deck at dawn, Bible in his cabin, logbook under his hand, watching the horizon with the conviction of one who believed in both God and good seamanship. He had no reason to abandon ship, no motive to vanish into the brine. And yet his presence, his wife's, his child's, his sailors, was scrubbed away, leaving only the vessel behind like an empty ribcage floating on the tide. No struggle, no blood, just absence, thick and unbearable. The central figure of this story isn't just Briggs or Sarah or the crew. It's the silence they left. A silence so loud as thunder for over 150 years. December 5th, 1872. Coordinates: midway between the Azores and Portugal. The British brig de Grazia, commanded by Captain David Morehouse, spotted a vessel drifting strangely, its course erratic, sails flapping like torn wings. Through the spyglass, it was clear something was wrong. The ship wasn't wrecked, wasn't sinking, but she moved like a drunk staggering home, alive yet hollow. The Mary Celeste. When Morehouse sent men aboard, the first impression was uncanny order. The cargo hold, sealed, intact. Provisions, untouched, enough for 6 months. The galley, a meal in preparation, as if someone had left mid-stir. Cabins, tidy, personal belongings neatly arranged. The ship's pumps showed some water had seeped in, but nothing fatal. The hull? Sound. This wasn't disaster frozen mid-scream. It was as if life itself had been carefully erased. But then came the details that bite. The ship's chronometer and sextant missing. The ship's only lifeboat gone. The logbook. Last entry dated November 25th, nearly 10 days earlier. Position noted. Weather described as fair. Nothing ominous. After that, silence. Picture it. 10 people, Captain Briggs, his wife, his daughter, 7 sailors. Simply gone. No bodies, no bloodstains, no signs of fight. Just vanished. And for sailors, who live by the cruel certainty of cause and effect, this was not merely unsettling. It was blasphemy. The sea always left a mark. A wreck, a corpse, a splintered mast. But here, the ocean had tidied up after itself. One lifeboat missing. That was the only clue. But why would anyone abandon a perfectly seaworthy ship in the middle of the Atlantic? Sailors don't leap into smaller boats unless death is already clawing at their heels. And there was no storm recorded, no evidence of fire, no leaking hull. The Mary Celeste was healthier than most ships that completed their voyages. This was a disturbance, the moment the ordinary snapped. Something happened between November 25th and December 5th that drove 10 souls to desert their stronghold and gamble with the infinite hunger of the sea. Something compelling enough to break the code of survival, strong enough to make rational men and women climb into a tiny boat and row into oblivion. The Mary Celeste had been a vessel. Now she was a question mark. And questions are far more terrifying than corpses. This is where the story stops being strange and starts being unbearable, because the more you examine the evidence, the less sense it makes. Let's start with the cargo. 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol. When the Mary Celeste was inspected, 9 barrels were found empty. 9, out of more than 1,000. And those 9 barrels weren't the sturdy oak type. They were made of red oak, a weaker wood more prone to leakage. So perhaps, someone argued, the fumes escaped, filled the ship, and panicked the crew. But if fumes had saturated the air enough to terrify, wouldn't there have been scorch marks, fire damage, or at least some attempt to ventilate? Instead, the ship smelled only faintly of alcohol, as though the sea itself had rinsed away the evidence. Then there was a lifeboat. It hadn't been ripped away by storm or snapped loose by some furious wave. The ropes were neatly cut. That means someone, or all of them, chose to lower it, voluntarily. But for what? The horizon was empty. No nearby land. No attacking ship. No signs of pirates, mutiny, or boarding. Theories began to unravel faster than they could be sown. Some swore it was mutiny, that Briggs had been murdered and the crew vanished after. But the crew's possessions, wages, and even their beloved pipes remained behind. No man of the sea leaves his pipe willingly. Others whispered about piracy, but pirates don't leave cargo untouched. And then there was the supernatural, the sea monster tales, the idea of ghostly hands dragging people into the depths. Sailors, already suspicious of the Mary Celeste's cursed reputation, muttered that the ship had swallowed its own. And yet, there's a quieter horror here, the kind that doesn't require monsters. Imagine Briggs staring at his compass, smelling faint alcohol fumes, hearing strange creaks in the hold, feeling the paranoia of invisible fire. Imagine Sarah clutching their child, sailors whispering about explosions, the panic swelling like a storm. And then, the choice, lower the boat, just for a while, just until the danger passes. And in that fragile calculation, doom slips in. But if that was the case, where are they? 10 people do not simply vanish without wreckage, without a body, without a single floating scrap of their fragile lifeboat. The Atlantic is a graveyard, but it does not bury every bone. The sea is cruel, yes, but this was clean. Too clean. The Mary Celeste didn't just lose its crew, it swallowed the reasons why. And in their absence, the ship became a mirror, reflecting every sailor's deepest fear. That sometimes the ocean takes without explanation, and that's worse than any storm. The salvage hearings in Gibraltar were supposed to be routine. You find a ghost ship, you tow it in, you collect your reward. But the Mary Celeste laughed at routine. Captain Morehouse of the Dei Grazia filed his claim, and the authorities, led by Attorney General Frederick Flood, began their probe. What should have been a rubber stamp payout turned into a courtroom theater of paranoia. Flood couldn't shake the feeling that the Mary Celeste was too neat, too intact, too staged. He accused Morehouse and his men of conspiracy, of luring Briggs and his crew into some dark fate, and then sailing the ship in for profit. His case was weak, built on suspicion rather than evidence. But his obsession poisoned the waters. Why was there a sword found on board, stained not with blood but rust? Why were some of the barrels empty? Why were the charts slightly disturbed in the captain's cabin? He spun these scraps into webs that led nowhere, but stuck to everyone's imagination. Meanwhile, alternative theories flooded like seawater through a broken hull. One, mutiny. The crew, drunk on stolen alcohol, rose up, killed Briggs, and fled in the lifeboat. But the absence of violence, the untouched valuables, shredded that idea. Two, piracy. Romantic, but impossible. Cargo and money were untouched, and pirates don't politely abandon ships. Three, natural disaster. A waterspout, some claimed, or an undersea quake that made the ship seem doomed. Panic, abandonment, tragedy. But again, why was the vessel still perfectly seaworthy when found? The most haunting theory revolved around the alcohol cargo. Industrial spirits are volatile. Fumes could leak, build, and threaten to explode. Perhaps Briggs ordered the hatches open to ventilate. Perhaps he had the lifeboat lowered temporarily, tethered alongside, while the ship aired out. Then, some miscalculation. A rope snapped. A swell separated them. In an instant, the lifeboat was gone, leaving the Mary Celeste to sail on without them, her decks echoing with absence. It's rational. It's tragic. It's even possible. But it feels wrong, doesn't it? Too banal for a mystery that has haunted centuries. Like explaining away a haunting as creaky pipes. You might accept it logically, but emotionally, the specter lingers. And that's the cruel brilliance of the Mary Celeste. Every theory fits just enough to tease, but none fit completely. Each explanation phrase at the edges. Mutiny, piracy, disaster, fumes, all feels like grasping at shadows. The ship remains stubborn, defiant, as if she enjoys watching us twist ourselves in knots, try and decode her silence. Here's where the story fractures. What should have been a mystery wrapped in tragedy began mutating into theater, rumor, and obsession. The Mary Celeste wasn't just a ship anymore. It was a stage where everyone projected their darkest fears. The salvage court dragged on for months. Flood, convinced something rotten lay beneath the surface, kept circling Morehouse and his crew like a shark unwilling to admit the water was empty. He questioned, re-questioned, twisted every fact into a grotesque shape. The crew of the Dei Grazia had risked their lives towing the ghost ship hundreds of miles, but instead of glory, they got suspicion. The court rewarded them only a fraction of the usual salvage prize, as if the Mary Celeste itself had tainted their hands. But beyond the courtroom, the world erupted with fascination. Newspapers feasted on the mystery like carrion birds. Sensational headlines painted the ghost ship as cursed, haunted, damned. Penny dreadfuls turned it into pulp horror. Whispers spread that the Mary Celeste carried a hex, that any man who touched her would be doomed. And superstition, once a background hum of the seafaring world, surged into full chorus. This was the turning point, not in the investigation, but in the psyche of the case. The facts had run dry, and so imagination took over. Ghost stories multiplied. Some claimed see monsters drag the crew into the depths. Others swore it was an attack by giant squids, as if Jules Verne himself had written the logbook's final entry. And then came the darker fantasies. Mass suicide, ritual sacrifice, even alien abduction, a century before the word UFO existed. The breakdown wasn't just of logic, it was of trust. A captain as competent as Briggs abandoning ship felt impossible. A family vanishing without wreckage felt impossible. The courts had no answer. The sailors had no answer. And so, the public invented them, spinning theories wilder than any gale. The Mary Celeste had crossed from the physical world into folklore. And once something becomes folklore, it can never truly be pulled back. Evidence was no longer the ruler, narrative was. She had become a cursed symbol, a floating Rorschach test, where every era saw its own nightmare staring back. If you're waiting for the neat ribbon of closure, the Mary Celeste spits in your face. There is no official resolution, no bodies recovered, no lifeboat washed ashore, no confessions or miraculous survivor journals discovered in a bottle. The only constant across every retelling is the silence. The courts eventually let go of the conspiracy theories against Morehouse and his men. There was no evidence, just the fever-dream suspicions of a prosecutor chasing shadows. The salvage money was paid begrudgingly, insultingly low, and the Mary Celeste herself was returned to service. But nothing about the mystery was actually solved. Theories, of course, calcified into folklore. The alcohol fume panic remains a rational explanation. It accounts for the missing lifeboat, the calm departure, the lack of struggle. But even here, cracks gape wide. Why would Briggs, a seasoned captain, risk abandoning a ship in the middle of the Atlantic with his wife and child on board for a threat that never even scorched a plank? If paranoia drove him overboard, where are the remnants of the lifeboat? The sea may devour, but it rarely erases so thoroughly. And then there's the echoing fact. The ship was perfectly seaworthy, barely 6 feet of water in the hold. Nothing sailors hadn't faced before. Cargo intact, supplies untouched. A ship worth more as salvation than death trap. You don't abandon such a vessel unless something stronger than reason forces your hand. But what was it? Invisible fire? Mutiny that leaves no fingerprints? A miscalculation so catastrophic it vanished 10 souls without debris? Resolution fails here because the ocean doesn't cooperate with storytelling. The Atlantic has no need for tidy endings. And so, all we have are the lingering questions, which sting harder than any answer. What does it feel like, rowing away from your ship, convinced danger lurks behind you, only to find death waiting in every direction? Did Briggs regret the decision, watching his ship recede into the distance, still floating, still alive, while the lifeboat dipped closer to oblivion? We'll never know, and that's why the Mary Celeste endures. Because human minds are allergic to blank spaces, and this case is one long, jagged blank space, an outline of 10 lives torn away, with no ink to fill it in. The Mary Celeste didn't sink into anonymity. She metastasized into legend. After Gibraltar, she was patched up, recrewed, and sent back to sea. But sailors whispered about her like she was diseased. Crews deserted before voyages. Men muttered that stepping aboard her was like volunteering for your own obituary. And, true to form, her second life was one long downhill slide. She limped through years of bad luck, grounding, storms, endless financial woes, until 1885, when her owner deliberately ran her aground in Haiti as part of a botched insurance scam. She died not with glory, but with shame, rotting on a reef, abandoned once again. But her story refused to drown. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, yes, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, helped immortalize her in 1884's short story titled J. Habakkuk Jeffson's Statement, a sensationalized retelling that twisted facts and injected supernatural flair. Doyle made her not just a maritime oddity, but a cultural specter, ensuring that the Mary Celeste would haunt imaginations far beyond the docks. Newspapers, pulp writers, and later Hollywood turned her into the patron saint of ghost ships. And she set a precedent. Every vessel found drifting without crew, whether it was the Auron Madame, the Carol A. Deering, or countless fishing boats, was instantly branded a new Mary Celeste. Her name became shorthand for maritime mystery, shorthand for the fear that the sea can strip a ship of its people and leave nothing but the husk. But it's deeper than nautical folklore. The Mary Celeste became a cultural mirror. In the late 19th century, she embodied fears of industrial change, the unease of trusting fragile wood against the fury of nature. In the 20th century, She became an allegory for the supernatural, a campfire story to spook children and sailors alike. And today, she's a riddle on the internet, a perpetual unsolved mystery, thread fueling podcasts and documentaries. The true legacy of the Mary Celeste isn't her cursed reputation or her tragic crew. It's the way she weaponized absence. Humans can confront disaster, death, destruction. But absence? Absence infects. It multiplies. It makes the mind gnaw at itself. That's what she left behind. An unfinished sentence, an unclosed door, a silence louder than screams. Here's the truth no one likes. The Mary Celeste will never confess. Ships don't write memoirs. The Atlantic doesn't send apology notes. And whatever swallowed Briggs and his people took their reasons with it. And maybe that's the most grotesque part. Not that they died, but that their story was stolen from them. Their absence was turned into a circus. Their faces reduced to footnotes in a legend that was never theirs to own. Think of Sarah Briggs rocking her 2-year-old Sophia to sleep in that tiny wooden cabin. A mother's hum fighting against the endless groan of the ocean. Think of sailors, hardened men with rope-burned hands, carefully tucking their pipes and boots away before going topside for the last time. They were people, not puzzle pieces, and the Atlantic carved them out of history with surgical precision. The Mary Celeste survives not because of what happened, but because we cannot stand not knowing what happened. She is our collective itch, our compulsion. Every time we drag her story back into the light, we're really scratching at the scab of our own fear, that sometimes there is no closure, that sometimes the world eats you and leaves nothing but questions. And so, the Mary Celeste drifts forever, not in the Atlantic but in our imagination. A ghost ship with no ghosts, just absence, dressed in white sails and silence. She forces us to stare into the abyss and realize the abyss doesn't care whether we understand. It never did. The Mary Celeste doesn't whisper answers. She sneers at the very idea of them. And maybe that's her final, cruelest trick. She proves that mystery itself is the most enduring cargo of all. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for listening. As usual, please leave any comments or feedback you may have, and I hope to see you all again in the next case.